So, imagine rolling a 20-sided die, right? It leaves your hand, it tumbles through the air, and the exact fraction of a second it hits the solid wooden table, the ambient temperature in your living room drops by like 10 degrees.
Yeah, and simultaneously, the floorboards beneath your boots actually shudder, like with this deep subsonic rumble.
Exactly. And then a volumetric 50-foot dragon made of pure hyper-realistic light just projects right through your drywall and glares down at you. And the craziest part is you aren't wearing a VR headset.
Right, no goggles.
No plastic controllers in your hands either. You were just standing in a room. And today, we have our hands on the leaked blueprints that explain, exactly how this is about to become a reality.
It's pretty incredible stuff.
It really is. We are unpacking this massive, honestly staggering stack of theoretical white papers, personal development logs, and architectural frameworks from URM Technologies, Inc.
Detailing what they're calling the Environmental Sovereignty Suite.
Right, which is essentially a localized high-fidelity holodeck.
Yeah, but, what sets this apart from the broader, often kind of vague promises of spatial computing is its laser-focused application.
Right, it has a very specific goal.
Exactly. This entire multi-million-dollar architecture is designed specifically for deep immersion tabletop role-playing games, TTRPGs.
And I need to lay my cards on the table right here at the start of this deep dive. I am a lifelong, totally unapologetic tabletop gaming enthusiast.
I think people probably guessed that.
Fair enough.
Yep.
But seriously, I have spent decades of my life crunching numbers, rolling polyhedral dice, arguing over really esoteric line-of-sight rules. And I've just been waiting for the medium to finally evolve past, dry erase markers on a laminated grid.
Which is completely understandable.
Yeah. Like, I deeply love the physical, tactile nature of sitting around a table with friends, but the limitations of human imagination and, well, cardboard are very real. When you get deep into a campaign, you really want to feel it.
And see, my lens on this is purely physical.
Right.
Because my background is in hardware engineering. So my day-to-day involves looking at these complex, pie-in-the-sky theoretical systems and figuring out how to actually translate them into physical realities. Systems that won't thermally throttle or crash or...
literally catch fire when you plug them in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And looking at the URM specs, it's this massive collision of our two worlds that I really didn't see coming. It's essentially an engineering marvel disguised as a gaming accessory.
So for you listening right now, here is why this matters. Whether you are a tabletop gamer tired of clunky mechanics dragging down your story, or maybe a tech enthusiast curious about the absolute bleeding-edge future of spatial computing.
Or even someone deeply passionate about neurodivergent accessibility in physical architecture.
Yes, absolutely, because this blueprint fundamentally redefines how human biology interacts with digital information. So, okay, let's unpack this, starting with what is undeniably the first major technical hurdle of any virtual environment.
The visual interface.
Right. How do you actually see the dragon?
Well, that is the foundation. Because to build a virtual world, you first have to project it into the user's optical cortex.
Yeah.
And the URM documents take this incredibly aggressive stance here. They completely reject the current industry standard.
Like, completely throw it out.
Yeah, they throw out VR and AR headsets entirely. No goggles, no pass-through cameras, nothing on your face.
Which immediately made me skeptical, to be honest. I mean, the tech industry has spent the last decade and billions of dollars shrinking VR headsets down to the size of ski goggles.
Sure.
So why build a complex, incredibly expensive room when you can just strap a screen to your face and be done with it? Feels kind of like moving backward,
It totally feels that way.
Yeah.
Until you read their analysis of what they call the bio-optical bottleneck.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the URM engineers argue that headsets are an evolutionary dead end. And that's because they rely on a biological process called stereopsis.
Stereopsis.
Right. Stereopsis is how your brain perceives depth by taking two slightly disparate images, one from the perspective of your left eye and one from your right.
And then neurologically fusing them together into a single three-dimensional whole.
Exactly. It's standard 3D technology. You show the left eye one angle, the right eye another, and the brain does the heavy math to figure out how far away the object is.
But there's a catch there, right?
A huge one. That entirely assumes the biological hardware, your actual eyes, are functioning in a very specific, statistically average way.
Right.
The moment you introduce any biological variance, the headset completely fails. For instance, this locks out users with stereo blindness.
Stereo blindness, meaning they literally can't see 3D.
Yeah. These are individuals who due to things like strabismus or amblyopia, literally cannot fuse those two disparate images
Oh, wow. So the illusion just doesn't work.
at all.
Yeah.
If you put a state-of-the-art VR headset on a stereo-blind user, the illusion of depth is completely broken. For them, it doesn't look like a sprawling fantasy landscape.
Right. It just looks like a flat screen sitting 2 inches from their corneas.
Exactly, which usually causes instant disorientation and severe headaches.
That sounds awful. But what about glasses-free 3D? Because we've seen those lenticular displays, like those looking glass monitors where you don't need a headset. Why didn't URM just line the walls with those?
Because lenticular displays fail an even larger portion of the population, and that's due to astigmatism.
Okay, and astigmatism being an irregular shape of the cornea. Like, instead of the front of the eye being perfectly spherical like a basketball, it's warped slightly.
Right, it's more shaped like a football.
Okay, got it.
So a lenticular display works by beaming these incredibly precise microscopic slices of light at different, very specific angles toward the viewer.
So the left eye catches one slice, the right catches another.
Precisely. But if your cornea is shaped like a football, the physical lens of your eye actually smears those precise slices of light as they enter the pupil.
So it scrambles the image.
Yeah. The resulting signal that actually hits your retina is totally blurry and corrupted. So your visual cortex looks at that noisy JEP data, decides it's useless, and just discards it.
And the 3D effect instantly collapses.
Instantly. So the URM architecture looks at this entire paradigm and concludes that the problem isn't the resolution of the screen.
Right, it's the biology.
Well, the problem is that we are forcing the human eye to do the heavy lifting of processing a stereoscopic optical illusion.
Okay, so what's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy. They are treating the human eye not as a broken piece of hardware that needs fixing or, like, tricking with a headset.
Exactly.
They're treating it simply as a biological sensor that requires a cleaner environmental signal.
That's a great way to put it. They are moving the 3D processing workload entirely away from the user's biological hardware, the sensor, and putting it into the physical room itself, the signal.
But practically speaking, as an engineer, how are they doing that? If I'm not wearing glasses and the walls aren't made of those lenticular screens, what is actually generating the image of the dragon?
The document details an array of spatial AR and light-field walls using ultra-short-throw 4K laser projectors.
Okay.
And we are talking about serious industrial hardware here. Projectors pushing 6,000+ lumens each, mapped perfectly to the physical geometry of the room, refreshing at 120 hertz or higher.
Hold on, let's just talk about the physics of that for a second. If you are blasting multiple 6,000 lumen laser projectors inside a standard, say, 12 by 12 room, aren't you essentially baking the player?
Yes, that's a massive issue.
Right, because the thermal load of that much light bouncing off the walls would turn the room into a total sauna, not to mention the sheer blinding brightness of it all.
That's a highly valid engineering concern, and the blueprint actually addresses it through dynamic masking and ambient light rejection materials.
Oh, interesting. How does that work?
So the walls aren't painted with standard matte white paint. They are coated in an angularly reflective substrate.
Okay.
And the projectors aren't just floodlighting the entire room constantly. They are rendering light directionally.
Wait, what does that mean?
It means they use cameras to track the user's pupil position. They only render the maximum lumen output along the specific optical vector the user is currently looking at.
Oh, wow. So only the spot I'm actively staring at gets the full brightness?
Exactly. The rest of the room operates at a tiny fraction of the brightness, which significantly drops the thermal output and the overall power draw. It corrects the input signal dynamically before it ever hits the eye.
Okay, so the room is smart enough to only shine the brightest light where I'm actively looking. That solves the heat issue. But how do they achieve a sense of massive depth without stereopsis?
Right, without the 3D trick.
Yeah, if I'm just looking at a flat projected wall, why does it look like a cavernous 50-foot deep dungeon?
Because they rely entirely on a totally different biological mechanism called motion parallax.
Motion parallax. I spent a lot of time on this section of the white paper because it's just brilliant.
It is. It's a monocular depth cue, meaning you only need one functioning eye to perceive it perfectly.
Right, so stereo blindness doesn't matter here. And motion parallax is something we process every single day, but almost never think about consciously.
Mostly when we're moving fast.
Exactly. It's what happens when you're sitting on a train looking out the side window. The utility poles on the side of the tracks, they zip by in a fraction of a second. But the mountains way off in the distance, they barely seem to move at all.
Yep.
Because you, the observer, are in motion. Your brain automatically calculates the relative speed of the objects crossing your field of vision, and it instantly understands their physical distance. Faster means closer, slower means further away.
And the URM system leverages that exact biological math. The room tracks your physical head location in 3D space with sub-millimeter precision.
So even tiny movements register.
Absolutely. As you move your head, even if you just sway an inch to the left while standing totally still, the 4K laser projectors instantly recalculate and adjust the perspective of the entire projected environment.
So the digital foreground shifts faster than the background.
Exactly. The rendered stalagmite up-close shifts across the wall, faster than the digital cavern wall behind it.
And by providing those natural movement-based depth cues through physical space, the drywall literally acts like a window pane.
It really does.
Because you don't need 3D glasses to look out your kitchen window and know that the oak tree is closer than the clouds. Your brain just knows.
And because the signal is corrected environmentally, a user with astigmatism or stereo blindness experiences a deep volumetric environment that feels just as intuitive and effortless as the real world.
They aren't struggling against a forced optical illusion that their biology inherently rejects.
Exactly.
But fixing the visual bottleneck introduces an immediate, arguably much harder problem. If the room is providing this flawless, window-like visual of a massive environment, and the white paper specifically says a Skyrim-scale environment, the user isn't just going to stand there.
No, of course not.
They are going to want to walk toward that dragon.
Naturally. Spatial exploration is the core of immersion. If you see a mountain, you want to walk to the mountain.
But the room is finite. It has actual physical drywall. How do you allow a user to explore a 50-square-mile virtual forest inside a 12 by 12 room without them instantly smashing their face into the wall?
Or, forcing them into one of those awful restrictive harness treadmills we see in VR arcades today.
Yes, those things completely ruin the fantasy. So how does URM solve it?
This is where we transition into the locomotion layer. The URM blueprint details the integration of an omnidirectional kinetic surface they call the volatile floor.
The volatile floor.
Right. Imagine the entire floor surface is constructed of modular, interlocking arrays of tiny, densely packed rotating disks.
Okay.
It acts as a hardware-level infinite scroll.
Like scrolling down a web page, but instead of your thumb, it's your entire body weight, and it's in 360 degrees.
Exactly.
But as a skeptic, explain the mechanics of these disks to me. Because if I step onto a flat spinning disk, the friction is going to grab the rubber sole of my boot and violently twist my ankle.
Yeah, that would be a terrible design.
Yeah. Right, so how does it move me backward without spinning me around like a top?
It's not a simple flat disk spinning on a central axis. Each volatile module utilizes what they call microtread vectors.
Microtread vectors.
Yeah, the surface of each disk contains tiny, motorized spherical bearings that can actuate entirely independently of the disk's primary rotation.
Oh, interesting.
So as the ceiling-mounted sensors track your skeletal gait and your velocity in real time, the system calculates your exact physical vector.
Okay, so it knows exactly where my foot is going.
Right. The moment your foot strikes the floor, the primary disk rotates to align with your path of travel. And those spherical bearings engage, driving your foot backward at the exact same speed you're trying to step forward.
So it's actively matching my physical exertion. I walk at 3 miles an hour forward. The floor seamlessly translates my foot 3 miles an hour backward.
Precisely. You stay perfectly centered.
I'm full stride walking, but remaining in the exact same spot in the physical room. But I have a massive problem with this on a systemic level.
The latency.
Yes, the latency. As a gamer, the single most destructive thing to immersion is latency. If I click my mouse to fire a spell and the animation happens a half-second later, the game feels broken and totally unresponsive.
Right.
If this floor is even a fraction of a second late in responding to my physical step, I'm not just breaking immersion, I'm falling flat on my face.
You've hit on what is arguably the most critical engineering challenge of the entire URM suite. It requires an absolutely staggering level of mathematical precision and hardware responsiveness.
I can imagine.
The blueprint actually mandates a maximum sub-10 millisecond response latency.
Sub-10 mutants. For physical, motorized hardware bearing hundreds of pounds of human weight to react to human movement.
It's extreme.
That sounds practically impossible. How do they even achieve that?
It requires bespoke edge computing, which we will definitely get to, but the 10 meets mandate isn't just an arbitrary goal. It's not just about preventing you from tripping.
Okay, what is it about?
It is fundamentally about A deeply ingrained biological defense mechanism called vestibular harmony.
Vestibular harmony. This is the connection between the inner ear and the eyes, right? Let's dig into the biology of this, because it explains why so many people get deathly sick in VR.
Exactly. So deep inside your inner ear is the vestibular system. It consists of semicircular canals filled with a fluid called endolymph and these tiny little hair cells.
Right, and it acts as your body's organic gyroscope.
An accelerometer, yes.
Hmm.
It tells your brain which way gravity is pulling, and it detects the physical acceleration of your head.
Okay.
In traditional VR, if your eyes see you sprinting forward through a virtual tavern, but your inner ear detects that you're sitting perfectly still in a chair, your brain encounters a massive sensory conflict.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, the brain has a very specific, hardwired response to sensory data that doesn't match up like that.
Yes, for millions of years of human evolution, there was only one reason your eyes would see movement while your inner ear felt stationary.
You ingested a neurotoxin.
Exactly. You ate a poisonous berry, and you are currently hallucinating. So the brain's autonomic response is to immediately trigger the nausea center to purge the stomach of the poison. That is exactly what causes motion sickness in virtual environments.
So how does the volatile floor solve a millions of years old evolutionary defense mechanism? It physically moves you just enough to slosh that inner ear fluid.
Exactly. Because you're physically walking, physically accelerating, and decelerating your own mass, your vestibular system is fully engaged.
But the sub 10 meters threshold is the magic number.
It is. At this specific polling rate, the system achieves true vestibular harmony. The inner ear's balance center and the optical data from the laser projectors are in absolute perfect neurological agreement.
And what if the hardware degrades? Say the motors heat up, the processors throttle, and the latency slips to like 30 or 40 milliseconds. What happens to the user?
The physical sensation is disastrous. If the latency is too high, the floor begins to react after you've already committed your center of gravity to the step.
No.
Yeah, the user feels a sickening, physical, pulled rug sensation. Your foot hits, you expect resistance, but the floor moves too late and you stumble.
And what if it's too fast or poorly calibrated?
Conversely, if the system is fast enough, but the precision of the velocity matching is off, say it moves your foot backwards slightly faster than your forward momentum, you experience an immediate loss of proprioception.
Like your body loses track of where it is.
Exactly. It creates a terrifying walking on black ice feeling. You feel utterly detached from your own traction.
It's walking a knife edge of physics.
It really is. But when the motors hit that sub 10 meters threshold with perfect vector bunging, an incredible psychological shift happens. The human OS, as the engineers call it, simply gives up trying to compute the discrepancy.
It just accepts the physics as entirely real.
Yes. Your brain stops trying to feel the floor and just accepts that you're walking through a forest.
Okay, so let's take a breath and look at where we are. We have a flawless, high-contrast visual feed that doesn't strain the optic nerve. We have an infinite, omnidirectional physical floor that perfectly tricks the inner ear into vestibular harmony.
A solid foundation?
Right. But if we stop there, all we've built is a very expensive, very pretty treadmill. This is still fundamentally a game. It's a tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
Something needs to actually run the simulation. Something has to spawn the goblin ambush, track the player's health, and rigorously enforce the rules of the universe.
Enter the Osgood-Rupert logic box.
The Osgood-Rupert box, this is the brain of the whole operation, right? The hardware dungeon master.
The architectural framework defines this layer as system state management. The human OS requires the physical environment to be reactive, yes, but more importantly, it must be logical.
It has to follow consistent systemic rules or the illusion shatters.
Exactly.
But how does a digital logic box interact with a physical gaming table? Because a huge part of TTRPGs, the part I honestly refuse to give up, is the tactile joy of the table itself.
The physical components.
Yes, the physical maps, the heavy metal dice, the painstakingly painted miniatures. If I have to do everything through some floaty digital menu in the air, I'm out.
Well, the URM suite preserves the physical table entirely. The room is equipped with a dense array of ceiling-mounted sensors and cameras performing constant, high-frequency system audits of the tactical play surface.
Using OpenCV, right.
Yes, OpenCV.
Which is the open source computer vision library. It's essentially AI looking at a raw video feed, recognizing shapes, and identifying physical objects in real space.
Correct. It reads the physical state of the table in real time. But I know what you're going to ask.
Oh, do you?
You're going to ask about occlusion.
You literally read my mind. Yes, occlusion. If I have a camera on the ceiling, and I reach my big, meaty hand over the table to pick up a miniature, my hand is blocking the camera's view of that miniature.
Naturally.
So how does the system not instantly lose track of the game's state the second I touch something?
It's solved through multi-sensor fusion and predictive kinematic tracking.
Write that down.
It's not just one camera on the ceiling. It's an array capturing the table from 6 different oblique angles. So even if your hand obscures the miniature from the top-down view, the lateral cameras maintain the lock.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Furthermore, the OpenCV model is trained on human kinematics. It deeply understands the skeletal movement of a human arm reaching, grasping, and moving.
So I can guess where the mini is.
It temporarily infers the miniature's location inside your closed fist based on the trajectory of your knuckles until you place it back down.
That is wild. The sources actually cite a specific gameplay example of this in action. The white paper talks about a player moving a miniature of a character named Arius the Black.
Right.
So as a classic tabletop moment, I reach out, pick up my painted miniature of Arius, and I physically move him 30 feet forward into the dungeon room on the grid.
Exactly. And the moment you break contact with the miniature and your hand pulls away, the physical miniature acts as a hardware anchor.
A hardware anchor.
Yeah. The OpenCV system instantly verifies the new grid coordinates of Arius on the physical table. And then the Osgood Rupert box processes what that move means in the context of the game's rule system and triggers a localized volumetric render.
The document uses the example of projecting an aura of dread.
Yes.
Because Arius moved to that specific coordinate, the laser projectors instantly map a glowing, pulsing visual aura directly onto the physical wood of the table, emanating perfectly from the base of the physical miniature.
It bridges the physical toy with the digital game logic completely seamlessly.
But wait, think about the compute power here. Running multi-camera computer vision, resolving occlusion tracking, rendering 4K volumetric light dynamically, and calculating complex RPG game logic simultaneously.
It's a massive load.
It is a massive, massive compute load. Are they running this on AWS? Are they pinging a soup computer in a server farm somewhere?
No. And the architects are aggressively specific about why they absolutely cannot do that. The white paper spends a whole chapter highlighting the fatal danger of what they call efficiency traps.
Efficiency traps, like relying on the cloud to save money on local hardware.
Exactly. If the system relied on cloud computing to offload the heavy processing, the internet latency would destroy the entire project. Even a highly optimized 50 millisecond ping to a server in the next state over creates a perceivable delay.
Oh, I see. You move the miniature, you pull your hand back, and there's a beat.
A physical stutter, yes, before the aura appears.
And the magic dies. The room feels like a laggy computer instead of a magical reality.
Exactly. So the game logic must live on the edge. The server has to be physically sitting in the room with you.
So what are they using?
They specify utilizing a localized, highly parallelized AI cluster. And they specifically cite arrays of Raspberry Pi 5s.
Wait, Raspberry Pi 5s, that's hobbyist gear. I've got one running a retro emulator in my basement right now. Why aren't they using a massive liquid-cooled server tower?
Because of thermal dissipation and acoustic noise in an enclosed space, paired with the need for dedicated, single-task, parallel processing.
Okay, acoustic noise. Because a massive server tower generates a ton of fan noise.
Exactly, which completely breaks the acoustic illusion of the room. By clustering dozens of passively cooled or near-silent Pi 5s, they can dedicate individual boards to highly specific microservices.
Oh, I get it. Divide and conquer.
Right. One board handles the left camera OpenCV feed exclusively. One handles the lighting vectors. One runs a deeply quantized, localized large language model just for NPC dialogue.
So it's an incredibly lean, highly optimized edge server handling the Dungeon Master logic.
Yes. Terrain generation, spell effects, line-of-sight calculations, it all computes locally so that the physical response of the room is as instantaneous as dropping a metal die on a wooden table.
This edge computing setup actually brings up a deeply philosophical engineering question posed directly in the white paper, and I really want to throw it to you.
Sure, go ahead.
The document asks, do you see the Osgood Rupert box functioning more as a passive interpreter of physical moves? Or should it actively poll user intent to pre-render terrain before a step is even taken?
It's a phenomenal question, and it represents the bleeding edge of human-computer interaction. It is literally the line between game mastering and mind reading.
Right, because a good human dungeon master anticipates what their players are going to do. If I describe a creepy, cobweb-filled hallway to my left. I already have the goblin ambush prepped behind my DM screen because I know, based on human nature, my players are going to walk down that hallway.
Yes, that's good pacing.
So should the Osgood Rupert box be tracking my micro-expressions, the subtle shift in my gait, exactly where my pupils are darting, to mathematically guess that I'm about to walk left and pre-render the digital terrain before my foot even hits the holotile?
From a pure engineering and optimization standpoint, predictive modeling is the holy grail for reducing latency.
Right.
If the system knows with 98% certainty that you're going to step left, it can spin up the holotile motors and pre-calculate the laser projector vectors a microsecond early. It creates a literally flawless, zero-latency physical transition.
But what if it guesses wrong? What about that 2% of the time when I fake left and step right?
That's the problem. If the system actively pulls your intent, pre-renders the terrain, starts moving the floor left, and you suddenly change your mind and step right, the system experiences a catastrophic state conflict.
What does that mean for the hardware?
It means it has to dump the memory cache, forcefully reverse the physical momentum of the floor motors, and completely re-render the visual light field all at once. That causes a massive system stutter.
And a stutter in a physical moving room doesn't just look bad, it physically throws the user off balance.
It violently breaks vestibular harmony. You're suddenly falling because the room thought it was smarter than you.
Wow. Okay, so what's the verdict?
So my perspective as a hardware engineer is that the system must strictly remain a passive interpreter. An incredibly fast sub-10 meters interpreter, yes, but it must wait for the definitive physical kinetic input, the actual weight of your foot on the tile, to confirm your intent before altering the physics of the room.
That makes total sense. You never want the room to try and outsmart you and accidentally hurl you into the drywall.
Exactly.
But it raises this wild conceptual question about how the Osgood Rupert box even knows what an aura of dread is in the first place.
Right, the translation of the rules.
Yeah, we're talking about translating decades-old pencil and paper rules written in the 1970s and 80s into lasers, haptics, and moving floors. How does a computer know how to parse a rule book?
This is where the documentation takes a hard left turn into the personal logs of James Hood, the lead developer of the URM integration.
I honestly devoured these logs. They're absolutely incredible. Hood talks extensively about spending the 1990s playing Palladium games and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition.
A very specific era of gaming.
Very. And for anyone who didn't play TTRPGs in the 90s, let me give you some context. It was the brutal, math-heavy simulation era of gaming. Hood describes it in his logs as running on a series of high-friction manual gearboxes.
As an engineer, I love that phrase. It perfectly describes a wildly inefficient system.
It's so painfully accurate. We were calculating things like THAC 0, which stands for to hit armor class 0.
Right.
It was this deeply unintuitive descending armor class system where a lower number was somehow better. And you had to subtract your opponent's armor class from your own base attack score to figure out what number you needed to roll on a 20-sided die just to swing a sword.
It sounds exhausting.
It was. Hood mentioned spending hours stress testing the structural integrity of obscure rule systems like Ninjas and Super Spies or Heroes Unlimited. He writes, "It was glorious, but it ran on unoptimized firmware."
Yeah.
You spent 80% of your time doing manual algebra, referencing tables in 3 different books, and only 20% of your time actually visualizing the narrative.
He realized he was treating his own organic brain as the raw compute engine for a massive, horribly coded physics simulation.
Exactly. And then he details this profound revelation he had. He spent years thinking he suffered from aphantasia.
Which is the neurological inability to voluntarily visualize mental imagery.
Right. He thought his mental screen was dark. When the DM described a castle, he didn't see a castle. But then he realizes that he didn't have aphantasia at all. He had hyperphantasia, but it was running on factory overclock settings.
He explains that he was perceiving the data at such a high byte rate that he mistook the underlying rendering code for the logic itself.
That's the crazy part. He wasn't visualizing the goblin, he was visualizing the code that generated the goblin, the logical invariants, the structural loads, the probability curves of its attacks.
He essentially decompiled the legacy code of role-playing games right in his head. He realized that legacy game rules aren't physical laws. They are foreign protocols.
That completely blew my mind. A fireball isn't a magical spell in a fantasy world. It's a red path code injection.
Yes.
A mega hero in Palladium isn't a character class. It's a hardware overclocking event.
It's a profoundly structural way of looking at data. He realized his brain was functioning perfectly. It was just functioning like a modern machine trying to process an unoptimized legacy script from 1985.
And here's where it gets really interesting. To solve this, he introduces a concept he calls the John Stewart Protocol.
Named after the superhero.
Right, the DC Comics superhero, the Green Lantern, John Stewart. Because Stewart's civilian job was an architect. When other Green Lanterns made a giant green glowing boxing glove, it was just a hollow shape.
But Stewart built it differently.
Exactly. When Stewart made a construct with his ring, he didn't just make the outside shell, he built the nuts and bolts, the internal structural loads, the engine blocks from the inside out.
And Hood describes utilizing this same methodology, building architectural 3D constructs from the inside out in his mind. He talks about feeling the spatial coordinates and the tension of the virtual bolts in a hyperspatial CAD environment inside his head before he even sees the room visually.
And he cites the Fate Core RPG engine as the breakthrough here.
Oh, right.
He says it was the only rule system fast enough to keep up with a brain that functions like an asynchronous JavaScript loop. Because Fate doesn't rely on heavy algebra or descending armor classes, it relies on aspects.
Which are essentially linguistic metadata tags.
Yes. A room is an armor class 10. A room is simply on fire. It allowed him to finally port 30 years of clunky legacy code from D&D and Palladium through what he calls a universal reality emitter.
Which brings us to the actual theoretical backbone of how the room functions. Unified Reality Mathematics, or URM.
The informational table of elements.
Yes. The white papers detail how the URM system views reality itself. It completely discards the idea of physical objects. Instead, it argues that all reality is simply information existing across 4 distinct interacting strata.
I really want to walk through these 4 strata meticulously because they are mind-bending and they actually explain how the hardware works.
Okay, so the foundational base layer is the syntactic strata. This is the realm of bits and qubits, the raw, pure digital binary data, zeros and ones.
Got it.
The next layer up is the semantic or biological strata. Here, the information isn't binary. It's encoded in DNA bases and codons. Its biological complexity functioning as a continuous flow of information.
So the URM architecture places computer code and genetic human code on the exact same periodic table of elements. They are just different programming languages.
Exactly. They're both just mediums for information transfer. Then the third layer is the cognitive strata. This is the architecture of thought itself. The fundamental units here are concepts and memes.
Memes in the Richard Dawkins sense, right? Ideas that replicate, mutate, and spread from host to host, just like biological genes or computer viruses.
Precisely. And finally, the fourth layer, which is the absolute key to making the physical holodeck work, is the pragmatic strata.
The pragmatic strata.
This is defined as externalized persistence, knowledge artifacts, books, databases, physical architectural blueprints, and, crucially, the physical room itself.
So as a gamer, how does this table of elements help us translate a TTRPG stat like, say, rolling the dice and taking 10 points of fire damage into physical telemetry in the room?
It uses the core mathematical formula of the entire project, the pragmatic saturation equation. Let me break this down so we understand the physics of it.
Please do.
The equation is omega art, which represents the physical artifact in the room, equals the divergence of information flow multiplied by the knowledge constant.
Okay, I see the Greek letters on the page, but translate that equation into the physical reality of the room for me. What does the divergence of information flow actually mean when I'm standing on a holotile?
It means that a legacy stat in a rulebook like 10 fire damage is no longer treated as a static dead record. It's not just an abstract number you erase on a piece of paper.
Right.
The system calculates its divergence, converting it into an active field of information energy.
So if my character gets hit by that fireball, the room treats that damage as real physical energy entering the pragmatic strata.
Yes. The Osgood-Rupert box reads the red path code injection of the fireball spell. It applies the pragmatic saturation equation to determine exactly how much kinetic and thermal energy that spell represents. It then translates that digital math directly into the physical room.
And the room reacts physically.
Instantly and violently. The smart home haptic integrations engage. The localized HVAC system instantly drops the ambient room temperature to simulate the sudden vacuum of oxygen burned up by the blast.
Wow.
Subfloor audio transducers mounted beneath the holotiles vibrate the ground with the exact acoustic impact frequency of the explosion.
So the math becomes a physical wave of energy that I can literally feel rattling in my teeth.
Exactly. You aren't just playing a game in your imagination anymore. Your biological hardware, your semantic strata, is directly experiencing the systemic logic of the game as physical telemetry.
Which, I have to admit, sounds absolutely incredible. As a gamer who has spent 30 years rolling dice, that is the holy grail of immersion.
It is the ultimate goal.
And this is but the more you explain the mechanics of it, the more terrifying it sounds to me.
Really? In what way? The engineering is completely sound.
I'm looking at the human cost of this massive sensory payload. If every single spell drops the room temperature, and every heavy sword swing violently vibrates at the floorboards, and the walls are constantly strobing with 6,000 lumens of 4K laser light,
There's a lot of input.
it's a ton of input. Couldn't this trigger an absolute paralyzing sensory meltdown for the player? Especially if the player is neurodivergent.
It absolutely could. In fact, the engineers admit that without a robust regulatory layer, this system would almost certainly cause a catastrophic system-wide crash in the human OS.
Okay, so they knew this was a danger.
Yes, and that is exactly why the final and perhaps most structurally important section of the URM blueprint details the universal scaffolding framework.
The accessibility layer.
Yes, but it's not an afterthought. It is explicitly designed from the ground up for users with ADHD, meaning autistic and ADHD profiles, and specifically users with extremely high interoceptive sensitivity.
Okay, let's define interoceptive sensitivity for a second. It's the awareness of internal bodily signals. Right.
Yeah.
Your heartbeat, your respiration, your digestion, your sense of balance. For neurotypical people, these signals run quietly in the background. But for people with high interoception, that telemetry from the body is turned up to maximum gain.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, a jarring physical impact isn't just felt. It's an overwhelming, exhausting sensory interrupt that violently spikes anxiety.
And the universal scaffolding framework addresses this by taking digital WK principles, the web content accessibility guidelines that dictate how we build websites for the visually or cognitively impaired and mapping them directly into physical architectural space.
To ensure the environment doesn't neurologically break the user.
Exactly.
They break this framework down into the POUR principles. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Let's look at how they apply web design rules to a physical 6,000 lumen holodeck, starting with perceivable.
So in a digital web interface, perceivable simply means having high contrast text, so a screen reader can parse it or someone with low vision can read it. In the URM physical space, it translates to the visibility of state. Every single change in physical elevation, whether it's a digitally rendered stair in the projection or a physical curb in the room, must feature intense, undeniable edge contrast.
Like high visibility nosing or focus visible strips?
Yes.
But why is that so crucial for sensory processing? If I have good vision, why do I need a bright yellow line on a physical stair?
Because of cognitive offloading. When the edge of a step is ambiguous, your brain has to devote active processing power to guess exactly where the floor is. It causes micro-hesitations.
Oh, I see.
By making the edge highly, undeniably perceivable, the brain can pre-calculate the exact motor command required before your physical foot even begins to move. The processing is entirely offloaded from the conscious brain to the autonomic nervous system.
It gives the brain that crucial fraction of a second to prepare the biological shock absorbers. It lowers the cognitive load. Okay, what about operable?
Operable is about maintaining a safe path of travel and enabling instant error recovery. In the physical space, this mandates the use of continuous physical handrails.
I loved this detail. The document calls handrails the real-world physical equivalent of an undo button or digital breadcrumbs.
It's a perfect analogy. A handrail acts as a constant, reliable, proprioceptive data stream for the hand.
Right.
In a high-stimulus environment where the visual walls might be simulating a vertigo-inducing cliff face, if a user loses their spatial anchor, simply gripping the continuous rail instantly reorients their vestibular system.
It provides an immediate grounding physical anchor point that cuts through the visual noise.
Exactly.
And the operable section also mentions strict rules about keeping navigation paths free of pop-up distractions. Like, you don't put a high-stimuli object like a flashing control panel near a physical doorway.
Yes, that's crucial.
Because a doorway is already a high-processing zone for the brain, you have to calculate depth, width, and speed to pass through it safely. If you add a flashing light there, it causes packet loss in the user's movement logic. They literally forget how to walk smoothly for a split second.
Exactly. The environment must not compete for attention during critical movement phases. Then we move to the third principle, understandable. And this brings us to what I consider the most critical, rigorous engineering rule in the entire document, The 1% jitter rule.
The 1% jitter rule. This fascinated me. Break down the mechanics of this.
The rule states that any sequence of steps, any incline, or any control surfaces must have absolutely less than 1% variance in their physical dimensions.
So if I'm walking up a physical flight of stairs in this simulation to reach a platform, every single step has to be exactly mathematically identical.
Down to the millimeter. Let's examine the biomechanics of human gait. When you walk up a flight of stairs, you only actively look at the first 2 steps. After that, your spinal cord essentially takes over, establishing a rhythmic, automated motor pattern. Right.
If step number 4 has a riser that deviates even a few millimeters higher than the average height of the previous steps, your foot strikes the wood a microsecond sooner than your brain anticipated.
And what happens neurologically?
It causes a catastrophic braking change in your rhythmic automation. Your internal CPU violently spikes as the nervous system frantically tries to recalibrate the motor pattern to avoid a fall.
It dumps adrenaline into your system.
Yes. For an ADHD user, that tiny variance breaks immersion, causes intense frustration, and instantly drains their battery for the day.
It's exactly like when you're typing incredibly fast on a keyboard and you hit a flow state, but one single key, like the ease key, is sticky and requires just slightly more pressure to push down.
Yeah.
It completely derails your entire train of thought. You have to stop, look at your hands, and recalibrate.
Exactly. The physical environment must be utterly predictable, mathematically devoid of jitter, to free up the user's cognitive resources for the game itself.
Finally, we have the 4th principle, robust. Managing what the document beautifully calls the kinetic handshake. The kinetic handshake is the exact moment a user's foot makes contact with the volatile floor. At that moment, there is a massive transfer of kinetic energy from the human mass directly into the floorboards.
And the environment has to handle that.
The environment must be engineered to feature specific elastic compliance.
Meaning the floor has a meticulously calculated shore hardness.
Right. Shore hardness is the engineering measure of a material's resistance to localized indentation. If the floor is too hard, like concrete, it reflects that kinetic vibration directly back up the kinetic chain into the user's ankles, knees, and spine.
Ouch.
So the floor must be engineered with a specific shore hardness to absorb the peak energy of the footfall.
Because for a highly sensitive interoceptive person, that jarring, high-frequency reverberation traveling up the spine with every step isn't just uncomfortable, it is physically painful. It acts like an unhandled exception in the nervous system.
And that elastic compliance pairs with the mandated high-impact insulation class, or IA. This acoustically decouples the floor from the underlying joists to prevent that hollow, booming resonance when you walk.
We've all walked down a long hotel hallway that just sounds loud, hollow, and boomy with every step. It's exhausting to be in that space.
The room is acting as a physical filter. It is actively pre-processing the environment before it reaches the human sensorium.
The document actually gives 2 incredible, highly specific examples of this environmental pre-processing. First, they mandate that all physical doors within the suite must utilize hydraulic soft close logic.
To prevent violent snaps or sudden loud slams, an unexpected door slam instantly triggers sympathetic nervous system spikes a severe fight-or-flight response.
Right.
Soft close hinges mechanically ensure that no matter how hard a player pushes the door, it decelerates and closes with a controlled, predictable acoustic signature.
And second, the 4K laser projectors must strictly utilize DC dimming to eliminate PWM flicker.
Pulse width modulation, or PWM flicker, is a huge issue in modern lighting. Many LED lights and screens dim themselves not by lowering the power, but by turning the light on and off incredibly fast, faster than the conscious human eye can process.
But highly sensitive interoceptive people feel it.
They absolutely feel it. The optical nerve registers the strobing. They experience it as an invisible, buzzing pressure in the room that causes severe migraines, eye strain, and generalized anxiety.
The URM spec completely outlaws PWM. It mandates DC dimming, which actually lowers the direct electrical current to the light diode, creating a perfectly smooth, solid beam of light with absolute zero flicker.
It's a much cleaner signal.
Finally, despite all these protections, the room architecture must include a safe mode buffer zone. A quiet, dimly lit physical corner acoustically isolated from the main volatile floor where the user can physically step away from the simulation.
A place to reset.
Yeah, they can sit down, break the optical line of sight, and regulate their nervous system before their cognitive processing is totally lost to sensory overload.
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, what URM is doing here isn't just about making a game room accessible. It's a complete paradigm shift. They are treating the physical environment itself as a responsive, empathetic interface that deeply respects the user's biological hardware, rather than punishing them for it.
It is profound. It really is. We've gone from the macro implications of spatial computing down to the microengineering of a door hinge. Let's take a second and recap the incredible journey we just took through this URM blueprint.
Well, we started by bypassing the biological limitations of the eye entirely, ditching stereoscopic headsets for massive spatial AR and leveraging motion parallax. We solved the bottleneck for users with astigmatism and stereoblindness by making the room do the processing, not the optic nerve.
We solved the physical locomotion problem with the holotile floor, requiring that staggering, mathematically brutal sub-10 meters latency. We achieved true vestibular harmony, preventing evolutionary motion sickness and ensuring physical balance.
We explored the sheer computational power of the Osgood Rupert box. Edge-computed hardware-level dungeon mastering, using multi-camera OpenCV arrays to track physical miniatures like Arius the Black, entirely avoiding the latency efficiency traps of cloud computing.
We dove into James Hood's logs, learning how unified reality mathematics translates the messy, math-heavy legacy code of 1990s TTRPGs into the John Stewart protocol, turning abstract rulebook stats into active physical telemetry, using the pragmatic saturation equation to trigger real temperature drops and floor vibrations.
And finally, we examined the vital necessity of the universal scaffolding framework, protecting the user's nervous system by mapping digital accessibility to physical space, implementing the 1% jitter rule, elastic compliance, acoustic decoupling, DC dimming, and soft close logic.
It is a masterclass in multidisciplinary engineering. And it brings me back to what we talked about right at the beginning of this deep dive, that inherent tension between the clean, mathematically perfect precision of hardware engineering and the murky, noisy, chaotic reality of human biology.
The triumph of the URM suite is that it doesn't force biology to adapt to the machine. It engineers the environment to perfectly cradle the biology.
Exactly. And while this entire document is framed around the hyper-specific use case of tabletop role-playing games, the broader implications are staggering. Think about taking the universal scaffolding framework and applying it to the architectural design of a hospital ward to lower the stress of patients.
Or applying the 1% jitter rule to the construction of a massive corporate office.
Or using those 4K spatial AR projectors to help someone with profound vision issues navigate their own home with high-contrast visual cues. This isn't just a toy. This is the blueprint for how all architectural spaces might one day adapt in real time to the physical and neurodivergent needs of the people living inside them.
It truly is the beginning of empathetic architecture.
But it leaves me with one final, deeply provocative thought, something for all of you listening to ponder as you look around the unoptimized room you are currently sitting in. If URM Technologies successfully builds this environmental sovereignty suite, if we create a room that perfectly predicts our physical steps, that pre-processes our sensory inputs to eliminate all neurological friction, that translates our wildest hyperfantastic thoughts into localized physical reality without lag, without stutter, and without pain, what happens to our tolerance for the messy, noisy, high-friction legacy code of the real world outside that room? Once you experience a reality that is perfectly tailored to your biological hardware, will you ever want to log out?